right. I see that we have a few attendees already here. So first of all, guys, a warm welcome to everyone joining us tonight from wherever you are joining. We are very happy to do this webinar for you tonight. We have an interesting lineup for you. Just to give you a brief introduction of what we're going to be doing, we'll be discussing some business-related options for you and potentially your family to get to the UK. We will also briefly discuss some of the changes that recently was brought to the Nationality Act or nationality applications in the UK. And then finally, we are privileged to have George and Gerhard from Fusion Consulting Group joining us tonight, and they will address a bit more of your business-related questions to the UK from an accounting and taxation perspective. So before we start, ladies and gentlemen, I quickly want to run through some house rules with you. So first off, we are recording this webinar. We will email the link to the recording to all our registrants. Whether you are in attendance or not, you will receive this afterward. We will also post a link to the recording on all of our social media platforms, so you are welcome to share them with your friends and family or anyone you think might benefit from that. Then when we go into questions throughout the webinar, you are welcome to send us any of your questions. Please do not use the chat function. We ask that you solely use the Q&A function. You will also see when using the Q&A function that there's an upvote option. The upvote option just helps us to see the interest. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session where we can then address the ones, or rather the questions applicable to most of you in attendance tonight. Then also please try and keep your questions as generic as possible. We want to be able to cater for all of the attendees today, but of course, in the interest of time, we cannot address very specific questions, and we want to give you as much as possible in this webinar. After the webinar, you are welcome to direct any further specific questions to our info box. It is info@bic-immigration.com. We will then direct this to the relevant department or person to deal with your question, and then we will see to it that you get sorted that way. Finally, one last thing to remember, this is not a webinar based on actual legal or any sort of advice. We are merely providing you guys with information for you to make informed decisions or to chat to us about your next move. So, all right. First up in the lineup will be myself. I will just pull up my slides for you quickly. So I will run with you through all of the relevant business-related questions. Just give me 1 second on that. Right, here we go. Should link up in a second. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, first up, what I want to discuss with you, as I said, is the business-related visa options for you. Once again, I'm briefly going to touch on these. I can't dig into all of the relevant requirements for this. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here well into tomorrow morning, as these are very specific and very complex matters in some cases to deal with. So the first option we have is called the UK Expansion Worker. What the UK Expansion Worker essentially is a visa. It sits within the Global Business Mobility category. The Global Business Mobility category opened on 11 April 2022, and it replaced the previous representative of an overseas business route. Now, some of you might know of the previous route or this new route, but it is a brilliant option. I will tell you a bit more about that on the next slide. There's some key differences between the new Global Business Mobility Expansion Worker and the overseas business route. It's both good and not so good. The good is that it's now a structured approach. If you own more than 50% of business outside of the UK looking to branch to the UK, you can do this. Previously, this wasn't possible. And then the not so good is now a more complex process. Could take a bit longer, but at the end of the day, it is very doable. It's a 3-step process. It's all about the genuineness of your overseas business. And wherever I'm referring to overseas business, this is any business outside of the UK. Very important thing to note is this is not a route to settlement, but it could lead to a more established route, and which will then in turn lead to settlement. And I will address that last phrase throughout my options as I go along. So UK expansion worker, the very important things to note there is this is for overseas workers looking to undertake a temporary work assignment in the UK. This person needs to be a senior manager or specialist employee of the company outside of the UK, meaning the overseas company, who is then sent over to the UK to see to this UK branch or UK subsidiary expansion. So this option is really for anyone having any sort of business outside of the UK, looking to establish that footprint in the UK and wanting to conduct their business there and have overseas workers there as well. You'll note that I mentioned the 3 steps. So the very first step that we have is a sponsor license. The second step that we have is a certificate of sponsorship. And then the final step we have is what's known as the visa application. I've just noted a few things for you there, which you can read on your own. But important for me to mention here is when we apply for a sponsor license, we have 3 very important things to prove, which is your UK footprint. That can be only registering a company in the UK, can't trade yet. You have to have credible expansion plans, and you need to show the proof of your overseas business trading. All right. The rest there, you can have a read at that. But if you have any in-depth questions, of course, just get over to us. So there I've also listed a few things for you that how this compares with the skilled worker visa. Skilled worker visa I will address in a bit. The skilled worker visa is your normal work permit. Been around for ages. Previously, it's been the tier 2 working visa. Now we're looking at the skilled worker. I've also noted a possible hurdles there for you at the end. And this is also something that Gerhard and George might touch on later. One of the big things is the opening of a bank account. And the opening of a bank account will be applicable only to the skilled worker option, not the UK expansion option. That is as a possible hurdle, but we can also address that in the Q&A later. Then one of my favorites is what's known as the Innovator Founder. Innovator Founder is also a route that's been around for quite a while. Previously, it was known as the Innovator, and just before that, you had the Entrepreneur Visa. So what the Innovator Founder essentially is it's a great opportunity for business-minded people, entrepreneurs, to start a company in the UK. If they have a sort of unique idea, innovative business plan, or something that will completely disrupt the market in the UK. As I said, there is previously known as the Innovator. There was also a startup option, which is now incorporated into this Innovator Founder one. The changes that we've seen from the previous versions to this version of the Innovator Founder is beneficial to all applicants. And when I say beneficial to applicants, I'm specifically referring to my next point on the slide there. The endorsement process and the endorsement bodies that you could approach is now simplified and structured. You will hear more about the endorsement bodies in the next slide. But in very short terms, we used to have a lot of endorsement bodies to choose from. Now you only have 3. So it makes the process a lot more aligned with others, and the feedback is also a lot better. One of the other positive aspects of this route is it offers an expedited route to your indefinite leave to remain. For those of you that don't know what indefinite leave to remain is, it's essentially a fancy word for permanent residence in the United Kingdom. Under most routes, you would need to wait a period of 5 years before you could claim that. But under the Innovator Founder, should you reach certain markers in your business, you might be able to claim that after only 3 years in the UK, which is a massive bonus. And then finally, this may lead into other routes, such as a skilled worker at the end as well, which I'll also briefly address when we get there. As I mentioned, the endorsement is a very strict process, but it is achievable. The parameters we need to meet is prove that your business plan is innovative, viable, and scalable. Innovation is normally the main sticking point for most companies, but with enough planning, with a solid business plan, this is very achievable. It's 4 endorsement bodies to choose from. You'll note that I mentioned 3 earlier. The 4th endorsement body is more geared towards people coming from universities in the UK who get grant funding and all of that. Important to note that even if you get the endorsement, the Home Office will have the final decision in the application when you apply for a visa. And that is the second stage, the entry clearance visa. Entry clearance visa is also a fancy word for your first time applying to get into the UK. And that still requires very detailed explanation, especially for your future with this visa. And I'm talking about your permanent residence application. Also, a common misconception is for people to think that this is only for tech companies. Yes, tech companies do have an advantage because innovation in tech companies is easier to prove. But as long as we can get over the hurdles that they pose for us, you are good to go there. And then just again, the stage 2 visa application, the entry clearance that I referred to, have to be brought in 3 months after receiving the endorsement. There's a lot of requirements you need to meet. Can't go into that now. And then once again, carefully plan. We need to plan and explain everything to avoid delays and to avoid issues in your future applications. And then finally, this is about genuineness. It is not a route to simply get yourself into the UK. Because it requires a lot of work and because it requires a lot of planning, there has to be a genuine intention to create that company behind it. Thirdly, this is no longer more business orientated, but I thought I would just mention this because these visas that I'll be discussing now, global talent and skilled workers, also kind of in the working category, in that it gives you that working right. So the Global Talent Visa, very briefly, is designed to attract leaders and potential leaders in the field. It's a non-sponsored route, which means as soon as you get this visa, you have full working rights to all companies in the UK, basically. Application fees on the Global Talent is a lot cheaper than other categories. You also have the expedited route to settlement. Should you be able to get endorsed as exceptional talent, no limit on the number of extensions you can do here. And there's also a great variety, which I will discuss in the next slide. The endorsement process, which is called stage 1. Here's where you need to apply to certain endorsement bodies, to your field of talent. So the options for the field of talent we have here is digital technology, arts and culture, and science and academia. So they do offer us a bit of variety for for professional persons that have a track record in their field of talent. One thing I also need to show, it's not on an official immigration record, so you can try as many times as you want to get this endorsement. Once again, we have a stage 2 application, which is your visa application, and this can only happen once you have been endorsed, and you also have 3 months in which you need to apply for your visa. The final one I want to discuss with you guys, or just mention again, a lot of you will know this, is what's known as the skilled worker visa, or the previous tier 2, just the plain working visa. So this is your more standard option. It also has a 3-step process, which is going to be your sponsor license application, certificate of sponsorship, and your visa application. Now, this differs a bit from the expansion worker, which I mentioned it at the start. So if you have questions on which route to follow to, create a business in the UK, get people over, please chat to us because that can get quite tricky. One of the big differences between this and the expansion worker is the fact that it already needs to be a genuine trading company. We also distinguish rather between a startup phase and an established trading company. Startup phase, you will normally see trading 18 months or less. The only thing that applies there is if we are in startup phase, there's additional documentation we need to prove in order to get this sponsor license. There's also a need for UK staff if we want to follow this route, meaning that we have to have at least one UK-based, well, present and settled director. What present and settled essentially means is this person needs to be based in the UK and there can't be any restrictions on their stay in the UK, which means British citizen, Irish citizen, someone that has European Union settlement status under the settled route. So, or someone that has indefinite leave to remain / permanent residence. So also important to note, and please go and look on our website for info about this, there's been significant changes made this year to the occupation codes and the salary thresholds. So if you have any questions around that, if you're struggling to put yourself into a category, also please reach out to us for that. This is also a settlement route from day one, meaning you get permanent residency, or your time in the UK counts towards your permanent residence from day one. It's going to take you 5 years on the settlement route with skilled worker. But what's very interesting is you can also combine this with the other routes, Innovator Founder, Global Talent, in order for you to get that settlement at the end. The one thing I do want to mention to you is you would remember I mentioned that at the very first slide as well. This is a possible next step for an expansion worker. So if you are in that category where you want to branch out your overseas business to the UK and you start off with the expansion worker, you can, whilst in the UK, apply for an updated sponsor license on the skilled worker route, where you can then bring in more workers and get yourself onto the route of settlement. And finally, this can be tied to the Innovator Founder Visa, in the sense that, yes, it counts as a combination for indefinite leave to remain. And secondly, if you're on the Innovator Founder Visa, take the example, you created this innovative company in the UK, you can apply for a sponsor license for that company to bring other workers in as well, provided, of course, that you meet all of the requirements. And guys, that's it from my side. For the business aspects and the working aspects, I will now hand over to my colleague, Kelsey Waddell. She will quickly run us through the recent nationality updates that we've seen. And it's quite an important update. So Kelsey, over to you.
Thank you, Dirk. Good evening, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Kelsey Waddell. I am an attorney at Breytenbachs, and I specialize in British nationality matters. I'm just going to be running through a short update from our side just in terms of nationality. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Dirk. Okay, so this update is geared for parents who have registered under Section 4L. You now have the opportunity in registering your own children as British citizens. Just as a quick overview, if you register under Section 4L of the British Nationality Act, after that registration, you are known as a British, otherwise known by the same citizen, which can be a bit of a mouthful. But what it basically means is that you can automatically transmit your nationality to any children that you have after you register as a British citizen. So this means that they can apply for their British passports and that there's no problems at all with that. So that's something that we already know. But what is new is if you had children before you registered under Section 4L. So a good example of this is when you had a child in 2012, but then you only managed to register as a citizen under Section 4L in, let's just say, 2022. You now have the opportunity of registering them as a British citizen. Before, this wasn't something that we used to do because it was an unclear area, but we've had some success and some approvals under this. So it's been very exciting. And we are able to do this now for people that are under the age of 18, whose parents were registered after their birth. And we do this in what we call an MN1 application. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Dirk. Okay, so just some basic info on this MN1 application. It is a little bit difficult to follow at times, and it can be a little bit tricky. But here's just a basic overview of what it does, and how much does it cost, and how long it takes. So it does cost £1,214 per child applicant. The application itself does take between 6 to 8 months to process, so it is a bit of a long process, but considering long term, it is actually a little bit quick. And in terms of the status for the children, which is what's really exciting about this new route for these children, if your child is registered under this new route and you've got, obviously, you've registered after their birth, or before their birth, sorry, before and after, your child can then become a British otherwise than by descent citizen with this registration. So that means that if you registered under Section 4L, you had your child 2 years ago, and you are able to register your child now, your grandchildren in the future will also then be able to get their own British nationality. So it does extend a few generations on, which is very, very exciting. If we can go to the next slide. What it's about, basically, I'm just going to give you a brief overview on the nature of the application. So the application that we make to the Home Office is discretionary in nature. So that means that the Secretary of State must exercise the discretion as to whether to grant your child citizenship or not. So it's not an entitlement. So it's not as if you apply and you automatically just get it. There is an argument that does get drafted, and we do have to make some persuasive reasonings as to why the child should be granted. It is a tricky application to navigate, as I'm sure you can understand. And we encourage all of our clients to formally engage our services so that we may assist you in securing your child's future and their eligibility for British citizenship for the future generations. What's really great about this route is you being registered under Section 4L, you're able to register your children who didn't get their citizenship automatically by a British passport, and then your future grandchildren can get citizenship as well. What's really nice about this application is that you can do it in one application, whereas other applicants have to go through a long visa route, entry clearance, further leave to remain, indefinite leave to remain, and then only citizenship. So you can skip the immigration health surcharge fee here, you can skip the indefinite leave to remain application fees here, and you can just do a straight British citizenship application for the children. So it's a great option to do. And I would encourage anybody that's eligible or thinks that they might be eligible but is not sure, or is just considering British citizenship for their children, definitely take a look at this application, because it could mean a lot for the future generations and your grandchildren, essentially. So that's from our side, and just in terms of the British nationality. I'm sure that we'll have a few questions on it, because it can be a little bit tricky. But if you do have any questions, you're welcome to email us and to leave some questions in the Q&A, and then we can get to it. But otherwise, that's all from my side. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Kelsey. Very, very exciting prospect that is. So, like Kelsey said, please get in touch with us if you want to know more about that. Then, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Gerhard and George from Fusion Consulting Group to you. They will address some important things to take notes of in terms of accountancy and tax in the UK. Gerhard, George, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I'll let George quickly tell us about Fusion Consulting Group. George, if you don't mind.
No problem. Thank you, Dirk, as well, for inviting us to your webinar. We're very happy to be here and to give as much information as we possibly can. We here at Fusion Consulting are a firm of professional services. We're not just accountants. So on top of the accountancy offering, we have high-level tax advisory, we have a legal services department, we have financial advice for wealth management, and on top of that, we do business consulting for our various clients and entrepreneurs. So this firm was created 8 years ago with a ideology of changing the professional services landscape, and the directors felt the need to put together some really strong, dynamic firms in place and partners to join our firm and offering. And last year we merged with Exceed Accountants UK, and Gerhard heads up our office in Surrey, who was part of Exceed. And that's where we stand at this present moment. delivering a high-end service to our entrepreneurs, individuals, and we also are very proud to have an international tax offering, which means we have international partners across the world where we help each other put clients in contact with each other for all their various jurisdictions for accounting and tax. So we don't do it all ourselves. We have various partners across the world where we all help each other. So having said that brief introduction, I will pass over to Gerhard to run over some of the basics of setting up a company in the UK, and we can then discuss any nuances that there may be with that a little later on.
Yes, thank you, George. I think as Dirk earlier said, you can go the company route or you can register a branch. In our experience, a branch takes much longer. A company will take a couple of days and you should have your company in place. So once you've chosen the name and assuming the name is acceptable to Companies House, you will appoint directors. You will have at least one director. You issue the shares to yourself as the shareholders, or if you're a combination of people, you'll issue shares in that ratio. And then the company is up and running and you can really start trading. So once you have the company up and running, there are certain things that you need to do on an annual basis. The first of that is you have to complete a person of significant control register or maintain that. Now with the anti-money laundering regulations ever tightening, Companies House and us as accountants need to know who's the ultimate beneficiary of the company. So if you put a trust on top, then or another company structure, that will mean that you will have to do a lot more work to provide the ultimate beneficiary, which will be an individual. So if you have a trust with lots of beneficiaries, you will have to give all the information of those, identify all those individuals, and provide the relevant trust documents. It is completely transparent now, and it's become an absolute nightmare for us as accountants. We can provide you with a registered office. The nice thing about that is that we can get all the correspondence from the UK tax authority called HMRC, and we can get stuff from Companies House, and then we can deal with that on your behalf. Again, when you register a company, just getting there to the memorandum and articles of association, there's a standard vanilla memorandum and articles of association with Companies House. That is probably sufficient to get going. If you need any more specialist share issues and stuff, then you will have to appoint a solicitor to make those changes, and that will then will be filed with Companies House. If we can go to the next slide there. So again, if you're a director, every UK company must at least have one director. And the director doesn't have to be UK based. You can be wherever. The problem that we see now with opening bank accounts, the banks actually do require a UK-based director. So just keep that in mind when you decide to register and create a company in the UK. So you need to file certain things with Companies House. As we said, you need to file a confirmation statement annually. That just confirms the shareholders and director details. And again, very important, that information must tie back exactly to your passport. You have to now disclose all your names, you can't just use your nickname. Again, it's become very, very, very strict. You need to prepare a set of accounts annually that you will file with Companies House. And you have 9 months after your company's year end to file that. And again, you also need to file a corporation tax return because HMRC wants their cut, or they want to know if there's anything for them. Now, corporation tax is payable 9 months after your year end, but you can file a year after your year end your corporation tax return. So again, in terms of the corporation tax, just to give you guys an idea, we had changes in the corporation tax rates here. It used to be 19%. It's still 19%, but for the first 50,000, and then it's going up. There's a sliding scale that works up to 25% over £250,000 profit. And you will pay your tax on an annual basis. It's not like any of the other countries where you have to pay a provisional tax, but the company will pay that on an annual basis once it's filed its tax return. So again, George, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, it was perfect. Just a couple of points to note. Obviously, our tax system, the UK tax system, has always had complications, and it's just a little bit long-winded, I would say, especially where you mentioned you've got to file the tax return after 12 months of the year end, but really you need to pay the tax 9 months after. So these are just some quirky things just to be aware of. Yeah, but also just on the payment of tax, that's for small profits. If you are a large company and you make large profits, then you would pay your corporation tax on a quarterly basis, as opposed to at the end of each year or 9 months after each year end. That's all I have on that past slide. So please continue, Gerhard.
And again, if you don't file your tax returns or your annual financial statements, or you file them late, even if it's 1 minute past midnight, you will get a penalty. HMRC actually, and companies else, they raise millions a year on late filing penalties. So, and it's very difficult to get out of those penalties. So just keep that in mind, that you don't want to incur a lot of penalties when you don't get things filed. Again, just adding there to corporation tax, again, late filing penalties and interest if you don't pay on the last day of the 9 month after your year end, you will be charged interest. I think that sort of covers the whole company scenario in a nutshell. There's a lot of digital reporting now to HMRC. So we have accounting systems, and particularly the online world. And if you have your own accounting system that you use, you have to make sure that these are HMRC compliant and they can actually file VAT returns. And I think we're going now for corporation tax returns that needs to be filed digitally. So we are moving away from a separate paper-based system. It will all be electronic. And yeah, that just means that HMRC can collect their money much quicker in the future. I think if there's any questions, you can please let us know. But I think that sort of just sort of getting back to the branch scenario. When you register a branch, you will have the same filing requirements as a company. So, and the branch profits will have to be included in your home country's company accounts. So again, it's just a subtle difference, and that your home country will always be responsible for any liabilities here. And again, a branch is probably a route that takes much longer to get registration. So just keep that in mind should you decide you want to go the branch route. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any particular questions on forming a company. As I say, just keep in mind that opening bank accounts are very difficult. Keep in mind that, and by the way, your company can have a bank account with a foreign entity. For example, I know that South African clients managed to open their bank account with Investec. So we always say, if you have a relationship and your bank in your home country can help you, that is the way maybe to go. We find that the main, what they call high street banks here in the UK are becoming very difficult to deal with. So we would recommend try the Wise, Revolut, these challenger bank online, if they can help you with a bank account, because there is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. The bank wants to, especially the high street bank, they want you to be in the UK to register your bank account. But if you are still setting things up from overseas, that's almost impossible. So just keep that in mind as well. So quite a few hurdles that you need to jump through. And we always say to clients, keep your structure as simple as possible initially. You can always add more shareholders later on, but to get your bank account opened initially, you want your structure as simple as possible.
Yeah, just to reiterate the point here that Gerhard is making, the banks have made it so much harder for companies with foreign owners to open up these bank accounts. So they will be pushing for customers to have a UK residential address. And to prove that, you obviously need to have some utility bills or something like that coming to the address. So you've got to have been in the country for a couple of months at least before you even register for such things. And this is what brings us to the chicken and egg situation. But please be aware that the banks have made it very difficult for companies to open up bank accounts as of late. And please do look at these challenger banks, as Gerhard has mentioned, because they may be just that little bit more friendly in opening an account.
All right. Thank you, Gerhard. George, that was very interesting. I think it's a question that pops up so often when we consult with clients or we have to kind of create immigration solutions for clients, is this factor of opening bank accounts and the taxation thereafter. And I mean, for all folks in attendance and anyone who has the questions, please reach out to Gerhard, and George will also share their information with you after the webinar when we send out the recording. It's very important to take good planning of these. I mean, the tax man is probably the worst boogeyman under your bed. So it's only logic to do proper planning on that. Now, for us to end off with tonight, guys, I'm going to hand over to our Managing Director, JP Breytenbach. He'll be leading a Q&A session for us to address some of your questions and also just bounce around some general questions that we may have seen in the past. Thank you, JP.
Yeah, thanks, Dirk. Well, I think if the panelists can just join me, that'll be grand. Gerhard, I think, if I may, some questions that I oftentimes get from clients, and I appreciate we can't delve too deeply into some of these, but oftentimes we've got clients that all they want to do is do business in the UK, right? So we talk about structuring, they need to have a UK entity. And then the question of professional directors, that kind of thing comes up. I mean, is that something that still happens? Can an accountant be a director, for example, of that UK entity, assist with bank account opening, or is that dodgy?
A few years ago, yes, we could, but with the new anti-money laundering regulations coming through now, it's going to become virtually impossible. Corporate directors, we just saw an update from Companies House, that will be a thing of the past. So, you're sort of in the bizarre sort of situation where, the country says, oh, come and invest here, but it's very difficult to get the people. So what we would recommend, if you have maybe family member or friends in the UK that can provide that, or is happy to provide that service for you in the start, that is probably the best route to go. And, just give you time until you get here. Yeah,
I think that goes back to planning properly, right? I think that's something Dirk you alluded to as well. Don't want to do something tomorrow and then you haven't planned it and then it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and again, talking about corporate directors, secretaries, we used to have Exceed COSEC Services as our company secretary. which meant, especially for clients overseas, meant that they had someone here if they needed something to sign or whatever. That made a lot of sense. However, now it's just so difficult because every time they go through anti-money laundering, we were directors of Exceed Cosec Services. We have to give our whole pedigree, it just delays the whole thing now. So we had to resign even as company secretary from all our clients.
It's incredible how difficult it's becoming just to do business.
Yeah.
Another question I oftentimes get from immigrant clients of ours is, so when I go to the UK, I need to pay tax. So I need to get a national insurance number. Then what, right? So what if clients aren't working for a company on sort of a pay-as-you-earn basis? How do they deal with that? And what if they've got income sourced from abroad, no UK income?
Yeah, so in the UK, up to recently, as you know, we're going through elections, so all of this may change, but there was sort of a non-dom status that, which meant that you can, as a new arrival, any foreign income, you could, as long as you don't remit it to the UK, you wouldn't pay tax on that. And that's now reduced to 4 years. We assume if Labour comes into power, that will disappear. And that means after 4 years, it's like South Africa, you pay tax on your worldwide income. So if you have rental properties in South Africa or get dividends from South Africa, you will pay tax here on that. Of course, any tax that you pay in South Africa, especially on your rental income, you will get a credit against the tax that you pay here in the UK. But yes, I mean, those days of leaving everything offshore, that's unfortunately, gone ultimately.
Which is interesting, again, trying to attract foreign investors.
Yeah, and entrepreneurs and those sort of things, we see those benefits, with entrepreneurs relief. If you ever sell your business in the future, all of those things are reducing.
But look,
countries. Yeah.
As Gerhard said, we're going through elections here, and depending on which party comes into power, they all say they want foreign investment. They're promoting it, even though that's under a little bit of a veil. But let's see what kind of benefits they do offer for people to come over. Because yes, they've made life a little bit more harder to set up business and open up bank accounts. But let's just see what the benefits that they come up with to entice people to come over and invest their time, their life, and their money in this country.
Yeah, I suppose that there's always the reality, and then there's always the soundbite, isn't there?
Yes.
And hopefully the reality of the economic situation and the reality of trying to shore up the fiscus will trump popular politics.
Exactly. And we know it, I mean, all the countries are in the same boat after COVID. They just need more money. Hopefully they'll focus on growth going forward. And yeah, you need to incentivize. I mean, having said that, obviously we have R&D tax credits and things like that in the UK, which is quite generous. Again, that's, people need to look at the overall situation and see what they want to do.
Yeah. And would you guys agree that it's oftentimes worth doing it, especially with tax, to try and, especially if you've got structures, things like that, do your planning before you do your immigration in many ways? Because oftentimes I've seen,
Absolutely,
if it's the other way around, a lot of your tax planning options are off the table because now
correct.
you've already done something.
Yeah, if you're going to sell your business abroad before you really want to do that before you become resident here. There are different tax solutions for people, and it's definitely, that is valuable advice. Plan before you arrive.
And tell me, Gerhard, something else that I sort of have an idea, but I think clients will find maybe a little bit comforting, is this whole double tax treaty. I won't get taxed everywhere all the time, twice. Could you maybe just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so let's take, for example, a rental property. If you have rental property, let's say in South Africa, and you earn rent or rental income from that, The South African government, and it's the same from this side, because the property is here, they want to tax you here on those profits. And in terms of the double tax agreement, they have the first bite of the cherry. You will then declare that rental income here, your South African rental income here. There will be a tax charge on that. If it's, let's say, for argument's sake, the tax charge in South Africa was 20%, and in the UK it's 20%, then the tax that you're going to pay in the UK is 0, because the tax you would have paid is a credit. If it's if the tax charge in South Africa is 15% and it's 20% here, then you're going to still get your credit 15%, but you're only going to pay a top up of 5%. If it's higher in South Africa, let's say it's 25% there and it's only 20 here, then unfortunately you're only going to get a credit up to your 20 that you pay here. You're not going to get the additional 5%. So the additional 5% will then be additional tax for you.
Yeah, wherever they can squeeze you, they will. Eh?
Exactly. Yeah. But that's, you know, that's sort of in a simplistic way. That's how it works.
Yeah, of course.
And there's different rules for different sort of income.
Yeah. I mean, that's always the case, isn't it? The devil being in the details, so to speak. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. Kelsey, I see we've got a question that maybe you can be so kind as to answer from Raymond Biddulph. I don't know if you can see on the Q&A, or shall I read it to you?
I've got it here. I've taken a look through. I am going to need a little bit more detail to be able to answer properly. It's a typical lawyer answer that it depends, but it does actually depend on the date that your wife is born, the date that her parents were married, the date that the grandparents were married, and then of course, when were the children born? Were they born in wedlock as well? And then we can maybe take a look based off the results from that. Perhaps we can maybe then just discuss this outside the webinar to maybe get some more detail. Maybe we can set up a consultation to go through all of the options in full.
Yeah, it's about as good a lawyer answer as you can get. But I mean, as a general rule, it would appear that there's an ancestral claim at least, isn't there?
Definitely an ancestral claim can exist here. We could even look at indefinite leave to enter, and it could also still be a citizenship a claim here. It just all depends on wedlock, date of birth, and where everybody else is born. Yeah,
no, absolutely. There's a question here from Roger Harding. I see there's a couple of them. Maybe if I just address them quickly. It relates to skilled worker questions. First question is, how long should a business be in existence for it to apply for a license, the Home Office, and then of course issue a COS, certificate of sponsorship, and what paperwork should be required? So effectively, if a business is under 18 months old, generally, right, you can license a business, create it today, in theory, license it tomorrow. Of course, that's a bit tricky. And what paperwork you need would depend on how long the business has been in existence, right? So if a business has been in existence for a bit longer, then you'll have a tax return, for example, that you can submit. If not, then you can't submit the tax return. So there's a choice of different types of documents. Bit complicated to get into here, but just pop me an email, Roger. I'm happy to help further. Second question, can a director of a registered UK company that is employed under a certificate of sponsorship of a skilled worker position of project manager apply for a skilled worker position outside of that area? Yes, short answer, in theory, as long as the individual meets the requirements of the next job role, right? Salary, and so forth. You can switch in country in question 3. Generally speaking, again, depends, devil being the detail, but generally from one employer to another under the skilled worker, you can switch in country, Roger. In relation to your question 4, the resident labour market test, I think is what you're referring to. That's been scrapped. That was scrapped many years ago now already, actually. So that no longer applies. So you don't have to worry about that one. What is the number of years for skilled worker visa can be applied for to keep? So it's 3 or 5 years that you apply for entry clearance, Your IHS payment is based on the number of years that you're applying for. So instead of 5, if you apply for 3, then of course it's a lesser upfront payment, but you'll have to pay a little bit later. And you cannot switch from a visitor visa to a skilled worker visa. You'll have to leave to your home country and apply from there before you can indeed return. So I hope that's helpful, but email me. There's more to it than that. Then a question, Gerhard, maybe for you guys as well. At what threshold, this is from Debbie, what threshold do you have to create a company? Thinking about a small craft business, teaching crafts or small gifts, more like a side hustle. I suppose the question here may relate to how do you pay taxes on side hustles, I guess, right? Should it be via a company? Should it be self-employed combo?
You don't have to open a limited company. There's no limits in this country that tells you have to be a limited company or not. You can trade as a sole trader, and you register your national insurance number and become a sole trader, and you work out your sole trade account and pay taxes. However, there are other things that you may want to consider depending on what your business is, and if you are serving the public, you may want limited liability status in case, for whatever reason, you get sued. You want that limited company in place so that entity gets sued for whatever it may be, not you personally. Because over here, as a sole trader, if you do get sued through your business and for some strange reason your insurance doesn't pick it up or something like that, then your personal assets are at risk. So depending on the business, we would turn around and say, set up a limited company, but there isn't a necessity to. The only limits that we have over here are for VAT. The moment your turnover goes over £90,000 in a rolling 12-month period, you have to register and charge and pay VAT.
Yeah, and that is a sole trader or a company. You're going to have that. I think, just talking about, sole trader or extracting money from your company via salary/dividends, the rules are constantly changing, and you need to just, if it's going to be your sole income, or you want to live from the company or from your business, we can do a little bit of a calculation to see which route would yield you the most money. However, having said that, with the recent tax changes, these differences are getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And if you, let's say you aren't employed in a different capacity, but you do have a side hustle, but you make £500 a month, right? So you're below the tax threshold. I would imagine you still need to submit a tax return, right?
Yes, you do. So depending if you've got any expenses, we do have a business allowance over here. So the first £1,000 that you earn in a year as a side hustle, you don't pay tax on. It's a side business. But anything after that, you would pay tax. For something as numbers that you said, £500 per month, it's not much, not worth registering a limited company for it. You will register as a sole trade, a small sole trade business, and you just put that onto your tax return as sole trade income on top of your PAYE payroll, whatever else and other earnings you have, and then you pay tax accordingly on that.
Yeah, I think, George, also just to add, you can earn up to £12,570 pounds in the UK before you start paying tax. So, again, as accountant can do a quick calc for people just to make sure if there's anything. Unfortunately, yes, you still have to file a tax return even if your business income is below that. But
Yeah.
it's probably unlikely that you will pay tax as a sole trader.
But just to elaborate, this is your income combined 12,570. So
Yes.
if you've got a job earning 10,000 and you then have your £6,000 side hustle, that's £16,000, you will pay tax on that £3,500. It's not a case of if you're earning 6,000 sole trader and you're on 20,000 salary, I'm not going to pay on the 6,000. It's not like that. They do combine it on the tax return, and whatever goes over the 12,570 personal allowance limit, you pay your tax on, and national insurance.
If you're married, is it still? So I remember back in the day, they take both parties through the marriage's income into account. Is that still the case, or has that changed?
There are marriage allowances. I believe, Gerhard, they are still around. Where if you're both low earners, i.e., you're both not on the higher rate tax bracket, then one spouse can transfer, and they are under the personal allowance limit. So they're only earning £5,000 a year. There's an option for them to transfer part of their personal allowance to the spouse, and then they save on that little chunk some tax. They pay 0% as opposed to 20%. But it's just a little saving. There's nothing too much in it, but there are some marriage allowances out there.
Yeah, I suppose every little bit one could argue helps, eh?
Of course, of course.
Now, to sort of put you gentlemen at the spot, forgive me, Gerhard, you and I've come a long way, but we've got an election obviously around the corner. Predictions? What do you guys think is going to happen? Who's going to take it, and what will that mean for us taxpayers?
Well, I'm waiting for someone to text me who I should be voting, because at this point I don't want to vote for any of them.
Yeah, it's tricky.
George, I don't know what your view, but it sounds like Labour has a big, if you listen to the polls, that Labour has a big chance to come in, Keir Starmer.
Look, historically, once a party has had over 8-10 years in office and they haven't covered themselves in glory, usually the other party always wins. So where are we? With 14 years of the Conservative Party, it does look like Labour's coming in by default. What that means for the country, nobody knows. Everyone is under the impression that if Labour comes in, there'll be slightly higher taxes. I think they're denying it. It's not true. We can only wait and see whichever party comes in place. But let's not be disillusioned here. The country bailed out a lot of people and businesses during COVID. They loaned money to people. People have run off with it and whatever and whatnot. We need to pay all of that back at some stage. So taxes are quite high at this present moment. They have helped a little bit with reducing the national insurance limits and levels, which is pretty good of them. But I can't see taxes being reduced drastically.
Yeah. Well, of course, if we then have a draft, another draft of community service compulsory, that's going to cost a few bob as well, isn't it? If, that goes ahead, it'll be very, very interesting. Well,
I don't know. I mean, it somehow seems they want volunteers, which they won't get, So anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, I want to see that happen. All right, thank you guys. Dirk, Kelsey, is there anything else? I appreciate we're sort of just on the hour mark now. Anything else from your side that you guys want to raise or ask?
Yeah, from my side, JP, I think I'm fine. I think you guys have heard my voice a good bit tonight. I'm sure everyone's getting tired of that. So yeah, from my side, just thanks for everyone being here and all of the advice offered. It's really interesting to listen, even sitting here and listening, obviously learn something new every single day.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Great.
Roger, I see you raised your hand. Feel free to pop me an email, jpb@bic-immigration.com. With your number, I'll give you a shout tomorrow. Let's chat. Right, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening, and we'll catch you all again later.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.